Well, hello there. I'm assuming we're live. I wasn't paying too much attention when I was being told what to do, which, as people know me, will probably see that's part of the course. My name is Andrew McCarron. I'm the MD at Sports Betting Community, SBC, and I'm pleased to be discussing something quite interesting today. Is your platform prepared for what we're badging for this purposes of this call, the ultimate 18 months of sports betting? I'll go through, well, as you can see on screen, is a bit of what that's about. But if I can ask Dave, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Dave McDowell. I'm the CEO and co-founder of FSB Technology.
And Joe?
Hi, yes, I'm Joe Saumarez Smith. Been in online gaming for 25 years, with all sorts of different roles. Currently an investor in a variety of startups, including one that actually uses the FSB's platform.
Hi, my name's Marc Thomas. I'm a partner at Propus Partners. We're a sports betting consultancy firm. I, like Joe, have been in gambling, specifically online gambling, for over 25 years.
Excellent. So, as I said at the top of here, the proposition of this discussion is your platform prepared for the ultimate 18 months of sports betting? And what do we need by that 18 months? Obviously, the pandemic has skewed our sporting calendar somewhat. We've just finished a rather truncated Premier League season, which means we're now rolling into the delayed Euro Championships, which is still called Euro 2020. I'm assuming that all the merchandise was already created, and it was too expensive to change it to 2021. Again, we've got the Olympic Games coming up in Tokyo in July. Obviously, it's not as big a sports betting event, but there's a lot of moving parts. Given there's so many different sports behind there, that some catch fire, some don't. And following up, it's we've got the NFL coming in September, and obviously they've expanded the NFL now. As you see on the screen, it's the first ever expanded 17-game regular season. Obviously, in the US, sports betting has been rolled out state by state at the moment, which makes each NFL season we're going to be coming up with is going to be bigger than the last one when it comes to sports betting. There's more and more clubs and the leagues itself get involved in sports betting instead of giving it the hands-off, the arm's length treatment as it has done in the past, to put it politely. Then we've got the Ryder Cup coming up. That's also in September. NBA again, and NHL. The US sports are really starting to embrace sports betting as a revenue stream, which means more visibility for the brands. And as the states come out, there's going to be more people legally betting than ever before in the US. So these are going to be huge sports getting revenues that they would never have got before. We've marked down here Tyson Fury versus Antua Joshua. I think that TBC is a very big TBC, given the machinations of the different boxing boards at the moment, and the hoops they've got to. Should we say the rings they've got to play in before we get to there, but that would obviously be an absolutely massive event on the sports betting side of things. And then we've got obviously running all this time. We've got the Premier League season with fans, games spread out, more opportunity, more enjoyment. I mean, this season's been a bit of a grind to watch Premier League football, even with the fake fan noise. But it should have a shot in the arm with crowds back at the stadiums. And then we've got the World Cup, which normally would have been in the summer, but I suppose there is one advantage of it being in Qatar and moving into November, December, in that it gives us a bit more breathing room. But as you can see, it's quite an 18 months we've got ahead of ourselves. So where planning now is paramount. So all the opportunities aren't missed. But so moving on to the discussion a bit. Dave, you sort of what role is FSB playing in this? I believe you've got some slides to share with us.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And it's the next 18 months. It's just got an absolutely fantastic variety of sports coming up, and like you said with the Olympics, not a massive betting opportunity, but I think that there are a lot of different ways to present these products to the end user, and it's really all about flexibility and trying to understand how you're going to use sports like swimming or I think there's even surfing in the Olympics for customer acquisition purposes as well. And again, hi everyone. I'm Dave McDowell, the CEO of FSB. I've been I tried to ask for a top 10 reasons why we're the number one challenger brand, and Andy told me I was only allowed to have 5. So really, I think the next couple of slides, I just want to talk about some of the things that we've been doing at FSB. I think we've doubled the number of customers on our platform in the last 12 months alone, certainly when it comes to the signings and rolling out new customers. And really some of the reasons behind that, the first one is really just, FSB is a full stack omnichannel supplier. And really, I guess what we're trying to say with that is, from a sports betting point of view, we've got retail systems, we've got web systems, we've got mobile systems, and we've also got the full online platform and casino management tools in the front end. And really what makes it interesting is we're one of the only customers or companies that's developed all that technology in-house, so you can access it through a single back office. And that just drives amazing efficiencies for your business, is be able to access your trading and your marketing tools and just absolutely everything from a single point of view, a single portal. Data-driven and unbeaten margins. We've got some larger competitors that love to boast the best margins in the market. So we took a look, and actually we outperform our competitors quite regularly and by a wide margin as well. And I think it's the use of real-time data to build our own pricing models to help present new products to the end user around bet builders or derivative products really helps us deliver some of the best margins in the entire market. Reason number 3, anyone who's been following the news, around 2 years ago, we took a private equity investment from Clairvest. Now, the Clairvest folks know the gaming industry inside and out, more from a retail point of view. And having a private equity partner on board for the last 2 years has really allowed us to reorganize and scale up the business, and that includes our operational services. I think at our heart, because of our white label background, and we not only build the technology, but we also operate the technology, and that's allowed us to scale up our trading team, our hosting team, our customer support, our marketing support, our retail operations. And we've also just at the beginning of the year approved another 50-person investment into the technology side of the business and a dedicated US team. Reason number 4, we really try to take a relationship point of view with our partners. It's not antagonistic. We're in it for the long haul. We try to structure everything so that it's a win-win situation. And I think one of the things that we try to illustrate this, and we've not been perfect over the years, but we really try to reinvest and to deliver a robust product roadmap. Maybe, I guess, looking back about 9 months ago, we took a view that even though our websites are still amongst the very fastest in the industry and most responsive, that the technology platform that we were on wasn't going to cut it going forward. And so we've reinvested into a full React-based front-end channel. And it's in the investments like that to keep our platform modern and modular and up to date is really what helps us build great relationships. And then the final point is it's all about agility. And every one of our customers, especially as we get into larger and larger customers, every one of our customers is different. And they've all got different customer experience requirements and different regulatory requirements. And it's really important for FSB to understand those requirements and to be as agile as possible when we help get a customer live. I think one of the customers we wanted to reference is a German iGaming operator, where in 8 weeks we took care of all the regulatory nuances of the German market, and we did the full migration to get them across onto our platform. And really, it just comes down to having very flexible and modern technology and listening to your customers about what's important to them, so we can make that migration as efficient as possible.
Cool.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, no, and if you need another reason, you've got a nice shiny SBC award behind your shoulder. So obviously, everyone in the community respects what you do as well. So Mark, I want to come to you because you deal a lot with players and you're a punter yourself. I mean, do you ever remember an 18-month period so full of these kind of big sports betting events? I mean, what do you think are going to be the key ones from a player point of view and an operator point of view, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think the truncated nature and everything that's happened over the last 12 to 18 months has moved things around. And I think you were mentioning before, Andy, every single one of these sporting events comes almost with a, if it's applicable, well, last year it was either cancelled or moved or without fans. So I think there's a pent-up demand. If we're looking what the key things to support that sort of 18 months of sport, then I think it's fair to say that customers, very much showing in sort of European or mature markets they're very much more demanding from their chosen bettors than they've ever been before. If we look at two products which have become a mainstay of sports betting, cash out, for instance. Now, not only do customers now demand that to be present on their site, but they also demand all the other variants of it, the premium add-ons, edit my bets, also partial cash out. And then Dave mentioned it, Bet Builder. It's now become, it used to be a nice to have. I could tell you some stories about trading directors who told me, this will never work, this will never work. But it's gone from being, a relatively niche product championed by a couple of tier 1 UK operators to being a revenue generating product, as well as something that harnesses the social media around customers. Currently only available really on football, but it'd be really interesting to see over the next 18 months that some of those major events that you highlighted there, Andy, so the Ryder Cup, the Olympics maybe, all of the US sports as well, whether they can be serviced by these bet builders. I also think there's a desire among operator side to continually adding more content, more bells and whistles onto their sites. Now, that poses, I think, a dichotomy in some cases, because there's a group of customers there who want ever increasing more content on there. And essentially that's really good for an operator because it means they're not leaving. They're not going to another operator. They're not going to a media site. They're not going to social media, for instance. And that's all great. However, there is another huge group of customers who say, do not change the way that I interact with my betting site. Don't change one button. Don't move it around. So I understand from a platform
change is bad.
Exactly. From a platform and an operator style, that's really difficult. And I think the final one, you mentioned the US, and obviously we had the starting of the major US sports on there as well, Andy. I think we'll talk a lot about it, as we all do within the US. But I think most tier 1, tier 2, every operator and indeed platform, including FSB, will be pushing into the US if they're not already there. And I think there will be a different expectation within there in terms of how they interact. US punters, by their very nature, tend to be quite stats and data driven. So products such as player props and team props from the likes of Sports IQ are going to be key going forward. And what will be really interesting with those player props, if they find themselves back into European audiences, as we stand at the moment, UK and Europeans don't seem to be that interested in them. But the expectation is that rather than us chucking things over the other side of the pond, they might actually influence our betting going forward as well.
I mean, when you say player props, I mean, how would that find its way into football? Because obviously you have goals, assists, and bookings, but that tends to be the top of it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to necessarily be. I'm sure Dave and Joe can testify to this. It's surprising how much action takes place outside of the US on the core 4 US sports. So migrating player props doesn't necessarily mean, from our sort of parochial view, of shoehorning a US sports product into soccer or any other of the UK sports. I think there's probably a big enough appetite within Europe for player props on NBA, player props on MLB, the same on NFL as well. I think the trajectory of those sports, powered by official data and some of the excellent deals that are taking place within the US, will power it back into the UK and Europe.
And the great thing about the player props, of course, is that they're relatively high margin. So from an operator perspective, rather than booking everything at minus 110, the player props, you've just got a bit more inbuilt margin. Obviously, it's harder to price them as well.
Yeah, I think, and for everybody who loves Kobe, there's probably enough people who don't like Kobe as well. So you might even, Joe, get action on both sides as well in terms of his initial performance, which levels everything out for you as well.
It's really funny, Mark, that you should say the player propositions may come back into Europe. We obviously, in football is a huge, soccer to translate for my fellow Americans. Obviously you can bet on who's going to score first in a game and things like that. But actually, the first product that we did as a company at FSB was we created our own fantasy football point scoring, the first real-time scoring methods, and then we offered markets on which player would score the most fantasy points. And what was really interesting was when we talked to traders at large bookmakers, they absolutely loved the product and they could really see the consumer engagement. But where we often got let down was trying to shoehorn a player proposition market onto a website that wasn't designed to be able to display it. If you couldn't show what the points were, then people didn't know what they were betting on. And I think, at least in the U.S. market, player proposition, the sports are so much more stats driven. Somebody to throw for 300, over 300 yards, or to run for over 100 yards, or whatever. It's a lot easier to get your head around what a lot of those player propositions are. But there's no doubt that the U.S. market, I think, is embracing them and just will continue to do so.
I think it's really interesting with UI UX, as you said, Dave. You can have the greatest product in the world, but if you're presenting it in a way that makes it difficult for customers to actually place their bet or go through them, I think it's one of the reasons, going back to Bet Builder as well, is that it's the popularity that I certainly didn't see of the canned bet builders. So the operator or the platform decides a long list of 50 standard sort of bet builders on a given soccer match or something else. Those are tending to be more popular in most cases than the ones that customers actually build themselves, which is slightly theoretically it shouldn't happen, but it does.
It's like the Chinese set menu. If you've got so much choice, it's easier if somebody else has that decision for you.
It's exactly what we're finding. And if you can do a pre-configured bet builder and you can put it onto a landing page, or you can push it out in a marketing message and have a customer come back and have that pre-configured and already set up for them, people want it easy. They want to just find something which is easy and seamless, and they can click on it. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing.
I mean, Joe, you've had experience on both sides of the table when it comes to operating and platforms. I mean, what are the essential tools you say would be required for making sure your platform's as efficient as possible during quite a high intense period?
I mean, the absolute crucial thing is just platform stability. So that's the first thing that we looked at when we were moving off our sports betting platform provider. When we were switching, the first question we asked was, can you actually handle the sort of numbers that we think we'll be generating? You've got 18 months where lots of sports events, perfect for acquiring new customers. There's not much point if your site's going to be down right in the middle of a World Cup game or a Euro game or the NFL. And there are definitely some other platforms that have really quite serious stability issues at the moment. And then the next thing we looked at really was like, how many multiple feeds from outside organizations, or the data feeds coming in, how do you handle those? So we thought FSB do a really good job of handling feeds from multiple different organizations and much better than other people that we talk to. They've got their own sort of algorithms for trading as well. So there's still a lot of platforms out there that are, the trading that they offer is basically copying the exchange prices or copying one of the rival organizations or scraping data. Mm-hmm. That's not, as data becomes much more of an issue, and ownership of data and IP, particularly in North America, that's not a feasible way to run a platform in the future. And there will be people who start to find that their data's just switched off during large events. Not going to make their operators very happy. And then, things like speed of settlement of markets, absolutely crucial. Your customers don't want to be sitting there half an hour after a game has ended, waiting for their bets to be settled. So that was something we looked at a lot. Margin management, Dave has already talked about a bit, but we were really impressed by FSB's margin. So when we switched, we went from getting an average margin of about 8% to about 12%. So that makes a massive difference. And then just the flexibility of the people you're working with. So the platform we moved off, they had different priorities. They were an operator themselves. And, if you want somebody who's got a dedicated sports betting platform and that's all they do. And FSB fit that bill very well.
Would you agree with all that, Mark?
Yeah, I think I missed some of it because
we lost you for a second.
My North Yorkshire Wi-Fi had disappeared. I think Joe opened with robustness, and I think it's sometimes, I wrote it down as well, it's sometimes we forget because we've all been in the business for so long, but you only need to look at, dare I say, at the performance of some of the platforms within the US for Super Bowl, and the corresponding, the corresponding news around that was made public, where, it was like going back to the early 2000s where, many platforms used to publish how many bets they took on Grand National Day. I think Joe also mentioned around feeds, and yes, I think that's incredibly important, particularly when you're looking at going into multiple territories, where each territory may have a different predisposition for an individual sport or so, US especially. And we did some work actually for one of Dave's clients recently, where I'm not sure Dave was completely happy, but we came to look under the skirt and give an overview, and certainly from a feed capability and indeed trading on major sports like horse racing, then FSB got a big tick.
I mean, with regards to robustness and the US markets coming on board, what is the biggest betting event at the moment? Will it be this weekend's Champions League final, or is there something else, Dave? And are some of the platforms that are out there in danger of a bit of a rude awakening once more of the US is online come Super Bowl weekend? Is it going to is it going to be a surprise at how much demand is going to be ahead of the Super Bowl with a bigger population?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that the U.S. market is just going to continue to accelerate, and some of the comments that both Joe and Mark were able to say, obviously very kind. Thank you very much. I think uptime is something which it can be really difficult to manage, and I think when you're dealing with different customers that have got different profiles of how their end users are using the system across payments and authentication and advertisements and all that, it can be a really difficult business. And I think that our approach has really been about focusing on modern technology and making sure that we've got a system that we can very quickly add more nodes in and take them away and scale with the demand. And I think that's it's really something which I guess if your software wasn't built in the last 10 years, it's a lot more difficult to actually apply that. I just wanted to pick up on one of the things that Joe had picked up on as well with the access to data, and I guess for the audience, just there's such a variety of sports coming up over the next 18 months, and I kind of wanted to touch on our philosophy over at FSB was we try to find the best data supplier for each sport, and my philosophy is that data rights will they'll change hands over time. You'll have some suppliers which are excellent in one sport, but simply don't have access to the data or strength in another sport. And I think it's really important that you're able to work with a wide range of data suppliers out there. And I think that was the point that Joe was making, is that we're not tied to a single data feed supplier. What we try to do at FSB is decide if there's going to be a lot of turnover for a single sport, then we'll try to access and purchase the raw data and build our own models. If it's a longer tail sport, like we mentioned, actually something like surfing in the Olympics probably isn't going to have anyone supplying it, probably going to be manually trading. But, I suspect that our partnership with Sporting Solutions will probably be focusing on giving us some of the rugby sevens and some things like that. And it's really important for us that we can pick and choose different data sources and make sure that we bring those together smoothly onto a single platform. I'm not sure if I answered your question at all. I think I was talking more about around Joe.
No, well, I'll rephrase it a bit. I've just noticed we've just got a question in now. If we're going to deal with some questions at the end, so if you've got any questions, feel free to use the widget. It should just be at the side where it says Q&A. It should be self-explanatory there. But yeah, if you've got any questions as we go along, please feel free to post them, and we'll deal with them at the end. So I mean, going back to. I guess rephrasing it, if you're an operator and you're looking at this 18 months coming ahead of you, and things are working at the moment, what are the risks of sticking with the legacy platform you've got at the moment?
So, I think it's really important to understand the customer experience and how efficient you are with your customer acquisition and your customer retention, because that's really what drives our whole business. And I think if you are being held back and you're not able to put forward the customer experience that you want to put forward, I look at it as sort of compound interest. You're spending 2, 3, 4 times the amount of money that you should on marketing, and it might not seem like a lot today, but it very quickly adds up, and you get a year down the road and the inefficiency has become the inability to compete. And so, I always think that if you know that you're not doing as good as you can, you should be trying to fix it as soon as possible.
It's very much under the law of diminishing returns. If you happen to be on a legacy platform, which as Dave described, has old technology, then every year that you don't do something, and that something can be lots of things. It can be build, buy, move to a platform like FSB, but every year that you don't do it, then the expense that Dave said on marketing, but probably more importantly, the development fees that you've got, if indeed you can get new stuff out the door. So trying to develop innovative new products, but more importantly, trying to close the gap on your rivals will become increasingly more difficult and increasingly more expensive. And at some point, as we've seen, I know from my personal experience working at a number of operators who had legacy platforms, at some point you can't do any more. You ultimately hit the buffers in terms of what is feasibly possible in terms of papering over the cracks. I think there are exceptions. There are some legacy platforms there which happen to be really good, and they do the job from there. And if your strategy as an operator is, I'm going to shore up my position within an individual territory which has stable sports, stable regulations, then great, carry on. But we all know that for the vast majority of operators, it's multi-territories, it's multi-states in the US, it's all the regulations around that, it's new sports, new content, etc., which means that sticking with what you've got just isn't palatable.
Yeah, and you can keep the customers for, maybe a year. They will put up with, something that they're just not very happy with. But eventually, one of their friends will show them the new app that they're using for a different operator. Then they'll move. Given the cost of acquiring a new customer, in the US, it's high. It might be $800-900 to acquire a new customer. If you spend that money on your platform and on your sports betting product to keep people on board, you're actually saving enormous amounts of money.
And I think a tangible example of this is I went on to it's probably not the yardstick everybody uses, but I went on to Google PageSpeed Insights, and I just looked at the speed of our casino homepage versus a large number of competitors' casino homepage, just because that was the most consistent content, and our page load speeds were up to 10 times faster from some of the very largest organizations out there. And I think that is it's just an incredibly tangible example of what the customer feels when they load up that page. How long does it take that they're sitting there waiting for the graphics to fill in? I actually did it as a little experiment to just try and see how we stack up. I was blown away at some customers who are absolute market leaders, who've got like 8, 9, 10 seconds worth of just waiting for a page to load.
Yeah, and also there's some operators. So in the live product, the price keeps changing all the time. The odds keep changing, and so you submit your bet, it's rejected. It comes back to you submit it again, it's rejected. It takes you about 2 minutes to actually get the bet on. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it seems that customers, will still bet with, I'm thinking of a very large Scandinavian business that operates like that. And I can't believe anybody actually plays with them.
It all comes down to the customer experience, though, right? Can I get a bet down when I want to get it down? How long does it take for my page to left? Do I have, does somebody else have a fancier app? I just think, back to the, my main point, if you're spending 2, 3, 4 times as much on your acquisition and your retention marketing, that's money, that could have been spent growing your business, that you're losing out on efficiency. And it's not noticeable 1 month to the next, but over the years it becomes quite significant.
I think Joe, you've got a really key point there, but some operators and platforms just completely forget about. So they'll look at redesigning, whether that's from a UI UX point of view or adding new features, and they'll end up with a system at the end where they say, look at this shiny thing, look at it, but you can't place a bet. No, but look at the shiny thing. So I think the fundamentals of clients being able to load, as you described, Dave, if it's a sports betting site, to navigate to pick their bets, to place their bets, and then everything that happens after that in terms of operational excellence is there a problem? Is my bet settled? When do I get my returns in? When do my bonuses get recredited? All of those things have to happen. And if they don't do those, it doesn't really matter what your site does, looks and feels like, because eventually you're going to lose customers.
I mean, with regards to sort of how technology suddenly becomes legacy technology, I mean, it wasn't that long ago where there was a certain big provider, everybody would use it for its robustness, but as more demands have been made on it, it's become slower. How from your perspective, Dave, how do you make sure you don't fall behind in that to become legacy tech? How do you keep implementing sort of latest technology to keep you at the cutting edge? So,
I think I said earlier in the session, if anything that was kind of built before 10 years ago is going to struggle to keep up, and the reason I use that as a yardstick is, I think it was around 2006, 2007, where over here in Europe, a few percent of the stakes were starting to be placed after the kickoff of a game, and that's really when in-play betting, certainly for fixed odds betting, really started kicking off. And I think that we started to see the development of some dedicated customers or companies that were collecting data and producing odds feeds and producing data feeds. And a lot of the systems, like the one you were referring to, Andy, which I presume was one built in the 90s, if it wasn't built to push live data very quickly through the system, then you're dealing with sort of an architecture which isn't fit for purpose for the way the industry has evolved. And so, for us, what we've always tried to do is we've got a very separate module that we call our data automation layer, and we use that for integrating into all the various data feed suppliers. We use that for driving our own real-time pricing algorithms, and then we use that to push data out to the various platforms that we run. And that's a nice sort of segregation between the bet acceptance platform and the management of the data. And so we can change suppliers and change models around without having to worry about the risk management tools that we built into the bet acceptance platform. And then there's a third layer, which is all about how you keep everything in memory, and you support the websites and the channels. And having that very modular approach to the technology allows us to keep it very flexible and to keep it flexible, robust, and reliable.
I guess it kind of relates to your decision that you made recently, Joe, about sort of platform migration. I mean, how do you get to the point where you think, right, it's time to have a look around and find an alternative, and that's one stage, and then going ahead and grasping that.
It wasn't my decision. I mean, it was the management team. I'm the investor, but I got involved in some of the conversations because migration does sound a bit scary if you've chosen a platform. But I mean, the platform we were on was really not particularly fit for purpose and was clearly going in the wrong direction. And lots of other people on the platform were thinking of moving as well. And it was the best thing we could have done. I mean, my techies won't thank me, and techies always say, "Oh, don't migration is going to be huge amounts of work. It's almost impossible. You'll lose lots of customers." But that wasn't our experience with FSB. It was an 8-week process. It was incredibly, as smooth as any tech project is. It was pretty smooth, and there was an immediate increase in customer engagement and higher margins. So it was definitely the right decision for us. I mean, I've been involved in so many businesses. I've moved between bingo platforms quite a lot, casino platforms. I know that migrations are painful, and also something that quite often sort of senior management don't want to do because they think it's a huge risk to their own careers. But I think if you're the investor in a business and you want your business to grow, you need to be on the right platform for the long-term stability and growth of your company, rather than just sticking with what you've got, but knowing in your heart of hearts that's actually not the best solution either for you as the operator or for the customers.
I think the risks, as Joe described, I think historically they did exist. So that there always used to be a rule of thumb that whatever your budget and timescales were for a migration to another platform, double them, then double them again, then add a zero, then double them again. And it was a painful process, and I'm sure it sounds like FSB have streamlined that completely. I guess if you want evidence about how nervous companies are about moving, is look at the strategies of tier 1 operators across the world at the moment. That they in some cases they've got 5 or 6 active platforms through varying third parties, or indeed with M&A activity they've inherited a couple of them. I'm sure if you went to speak to the CEOs or CTOs of all those companies, and indeed the investors, Joe, and said, how many platforms would you like? They'd probably say 1 or 2, when in reality they've got 5 or 6. So I think it is the right thing to do, but I suspect with regulations being what they are, and trying to both protect your underlying business as well as move into other territories, then this multi-platform approach will still occur up to the point whereby the nervousness of moving disappears.
I guess what a point from that is something you mentioned earlier about also the fear of change on the customer behavior. If you've got customers coming in and they're behaving the same way, you don't really want to disrupt that. I mean, I remember we're talking 10 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago, there was one operator I know who kept open their SMS betting because they had one high roller punter using it, and he was basically keeping it. They didn't want to threaten his business by closing down the SMS function, so they kept it going just for this one customer because they were too scared to migrate him onto something which would have provided a much nicer experience. So it's it's an interesting dichotomy. I mean, Dave, when customers come to you, what's the process? What are they looking for when they come to you, and how do you sort of take them through the whole process?
Yeah, I think there are really probably 2 different things that are going through their mind, right? One is, how can we improve the product we're putting in front of the customer? What are the user journeys that we want to preserve, and how can we improve upon what we've already got? And then there's the other part, which I think Marc mentioned with the doubling and the adding of zeros, which is what's the risk of failure? Like, what's going to happen if we don't actually do this? And I think we often see this great reticence to engage in a migration process because it feels like something that's got a lot of risk that could go wrong, when the reality is, we'll sit down with the customer, we'll talk about the user experience, we can do fully bespoke front ends sitting on top of our content management system. So it's really about the painting and the veneers and the user experience rather than building the code. We can talk about different products that you want to put in, whether they're virtuals or casino or live dealer. Just really make sure that we understand what product you want to put in front of the customer and build that out, go through the normal acceptance testing. The migration then really just comes down to capturing the customer data in a structured way from your existing suppliers so that we can turn the systems off in the middle of the night and bring them back up in the morning. And obviously there's a lot of planning that goes into understanding that data, practicing the transfers, making sure that we know what's going to happen on the night. But the actual disruption to the end user is usually overnight. while we kind of turn one system off, capture the status of all the accounts, transfer the data across, and bring it back up. It's not, as Joe said, it was an 8-week process, and that one included some pretty large regulatory requirements going into new territory as well.
I mean, to me, 8 weeks seems pretty reasonable amount of time. I mean, is that time shortening, or is that just seems to be
no, it's
sweet spot?
If you look at what has to take place, some customers can sit on. We've got various platforms that are already in place, multi-tenanted platforms. We're already trading, and we can get people up and running on that platform very quickly. And it really is. It's looking at the compliance controls. It's looking at the front end solution. For other customers, if they want to have what we call an enterprise platform, and they want to take control and they want to integrate different data sources, that's a longer project. But again, we're set up to do both of those, because what we're not doing is rebuilding the platform every time or rebuilding the website every time. What we're doing is deploying it with certain configurations which are appropriate to the market, and each of the front ends is already bespoke. And so it's really just working with the design to make sure that we've got the right user experience. And then these projects are a lot smaller than what they used to be when they included, a 18-month project to build the entire sportsbook from scratch.
I would have said 8 weeks was pretty quick in any tech in gaming, given the it's the regulatory stuff that really slows things down. It's for any particular market, just making sure that you meet the requirements. It's not optional, so you just have to make sure everything's in place.
Okay, so I mean, Mark, coming to you. I mean, what's the one key thing that operators should demand from their platform over this next 18-month period?
I think one is a bit restricted on this, so I'll rattle out a few. I mean, we've mentioned to be robust, and we've also mentioned the ability to ultimately provide customers with engaging content, features, etc., to whichever territories that they happen to be in. I guess we've not mentioned it so far, but it's also as well to provide operators tools and systems that allow them to interact with their players in a responsible way as well. So, and I know FSB have got some really good tools on this as well, but the spectre of further regulations in various European territories. Also, I know Joe will know this too, that the regulations in Germany and the Netherlands, for instance, are built upon player protection outwards. So I think it's the last chance for us as an industry in reality, to get these things right, and a platform needs to be able to support that. It's also as well providing operators with all the tools that they need. So we've mentioned them in passing, but the ability to market effectively, to have optimization tools around bonusing, for instance, to trade each customer, almost as an individually, but also have some automation sitting behind that. And I guess, one thing we haven't mentioned really is to be able to analyze the data. I think one of the problems in reality with operators, large and small, up until fairly recently, is that the data, the KPIs that you're measuring really are around how much has come in, how much has gone out, how much is my bonus cost, etc., rather than being able to mine that data down. And look, as operators, what we want to do is we want to provide engaging betting opportunities, and quite frankly, at the lowest price that will get that customer to have a bet. And if you can do some data analysis around that, providing the ability to take more with less risk and less margin, then fantastic.
What's your take on it, Joe? What are you going to be demanding of FSB, or the management to demand of FSB over the next 18 months?
More for less.
Yeah, it's absolutely true that I don't think I've never met an operator. I mean, this is somebody who's run a tech company supplying into the. You never meet an operator who's completely happy with the tech provider. That would be extremely surprising. I think for me, it's keep on doing what they're doing, adding more features all the time. Certainly the stuff around high margin products, the build a bet products and things like that, absolutely crucial to keeping customers on the site and keeping them coming back. And then also, yes, to making sure that the margins remain at the sort of higher levels, because there's constantly people getting, punters getting better, bettors getting better at what they do, and you can't keep trading in the same way all the time. Everything evolves quite quickly.
Dave, is there anything you're expecting to be asked?
It's a little bit vague, but really I think what we try and focus on is sort of empowerment and efficiency, and by that it's really trying to understand how an operator wants to run their business, and then our role is to make sure that we can run the parts of the business that you don't want to run, and that you can run the parts that you do want to run. And by that it's if we look at trading, just as an example, we've got a full managed trading service where we buy all the data feeds, we do all the trading, all the risk management, all the customer profiling. And it's easy to get your head around sort of the old school model where you buy a legacy platform, you hire a couple hundred traders, and you do everything yourself. But it's that middle ground that we call hybrid trading, where with a small team of traders, you can take over a sport which might be culturally relevant or locally important. And you can really micromanage that sport or a couple of sports, but leave the long tail of sports to us to manage. And I think it's trying to understand what a customer wants to do so that they're really empowered to run the business the way they want to run. And then that efficiency comes from not only the technology and the automation that we build into the tools, but also the services that we provide so that we can run first or second line customer support, or the safe gaming interactions, or we could set up a lot of the customer promotions, doing those pre-configured bet builders so the customers got them there when they land. We can do as much or as little of that setup as you want to try and help our partners focus on driving growth and making sure that their energy goes into revenue growth rather than operational firefighting.
Do you expect that hybrid model to be more prevalent during the Olympics, say, when there's so many different sports? Each operator might have a different niche sport that they want to focus on.
I think it's more likely that that most of the sports in the Olympics, they'll want someone like us to just kind of do the heavy lifting.
It's too hard that you do this.
get it all set up, make sure the prices are fine. Try and understand how we can get an offer. If we've got a local athlete who's very popular, maybe we can make sure that we figure out how to promote that sport. But I think what's more relevant is we want to make sure that we can change the NFL lines and focus on the bigger picture stuff.
We've got a bunch of questions in, so I'll just rush. Well, I don't want to rush through them, but we're going to be running out of time pretty soon. I mean, there's a question here from Erin. She's talking about elevating the overall customer experience. I guess this is to Marc. What would you see as the most sort of engaging form of content for bettors? Obviously, you've got streamers on the slot side of things. Could you see that coming into the sports betting side?
Yeah, I mean, I think streaming has been an important part of additional content for operators large and small, and I know that Dave through FSB cater for lots of multiple providers through that. I think it is important. I think it engages better. There's question marks always around the cost for it because it tends to be a high ticket item, but providing something in a territory which either matches your major competitors or removes that gap completely, I think is important. I think there's jobs for other forms, so sub streaming, if you like, so improved virtualizations and visualizations. I think it's been, and Dave will tell me he's got huge plans within this, but it's been relatively stagnant. The major providers have been providing their scoreboards for many years, and not a lot has changed. So there's potentially an opportunity there. I think as well if you look at some of the larger US firms, Barstools, for instance, those sort of guys, their product is very much tied around content and media as well. So it is that sort of full service of content plus media plus betting, with betting being a really important part of it. And I think we're likely to see more of that going forward.
I mean, what I've seen with some of the content platforms is starting doing streaming parties, watch parties of the same kind of the same content, usually films at the moment. But it'd be interesting if we end up sliding into slide into sports on that side, and obviously the struggles between streaming and live betting might clash a few times, but
I think streaming as well. Andy, it's been around for quite a few years, and obviously the latency is always the huge issue, because if you're viewing something and you're trying to get a bet on based around what you're viewing, and as Joe was saying before, but with good reason this time, the market is suspended because there's a goal coming up. There's no better way to watch whether a goal is going to happen is watch when the betting suspends, which is just below. Now those latencies are getting shorter and shorter, which improves the customer experience, but it's never going to be, well, it might get close to live, but operators are always going to have this, and I think customers expect that in some cases.
I mean, there's a question here about play limits. It's not really for a platform, but I'm guessing certainly in Europe, if a players are limited, it's not necessarily an issue on the retention side of things. It's a case of being able to risk manage your book a bit more. I'm not sure.
I mean, Dave may have something to say about that, but from the books I've seen in the US, if you want to bet on a total or a money line or the point spread, the limits are pretty high. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of the bets that are reported are much more than pretty much any bookmaker in Europe would take. It's where the limits are on things like player props, and it's just they're harder to price and people are shrewder. And I think there's a sort of expectation because it's a sort of relatively young market. There's lots of people who just say, well, I should be able to have any bet that I can ever want on any market that's put up. But you can't do that in the financial markets. If you're betting on something obscure, there's going to be a limit.
Joe's rather stolen my thunder then, because I was going to try and be controversial there and say there's two sides of this completely. On one side, as Joe's just described, there seems to be among customers, of which I am one as well, a God-given right to have whatever bet I want at any given time. On the flip side of that, though, I will say that there is some poor technology and lazy trading teams as well who will set very, very low limits because ultimately they're trying to protect a position when in reality they should be doing more for customers. I think tools that can work within there, which I know FSB offer in terms of over-ask mechanisms. So, if you're coming on and saying, I want $1,000 on something and the limit's 500, then the trader should take a concerted view, look at the other book, look at the demography of the client, what's his or her lifetime value, and then decide to up that limit, and those things happen. But yeah, Joe's absolutely right. A God-given right to walk up and have as much as you want on whatever you want doesn't exist and shouldn't do so.
And certainly from what I've seen is just full-on banning somebody doesn't necessarily work, because if you're hot on one sport, but you're also better in another sport, you're very unlikely to be hot on two different sports. So there's a way of managing that player. I mean, okay, so that's interesting take.
Can I just jump in there? I think
sure.
One of the things that Marc said earlier in the session was about the use of data and just how we've got so much data, but not a lot of people and operators use it. I think trying to understand what limits you want to take from an individual customer is very much based on how well you know that customer, and obviously if you want to increase or decrease their limits, what information do you have available? And I think as an industry, we've got a reputation. Somebody mentioned, lazy traders. Quite often, if you win your first bet, you're immediately going to find that your account has been factored down and you can't get a large bet on. And I think building tools where we can see how what you've bet on, what time you've bet on it, how the odds have changed on the thing that you bet on, help us in take a much better informed decision. And then we've actually got one of our clever AI members of the quant team put together something which is trying to figure out what player factors somebody had using AI to try to identify what your factors should be. And we're using tools like that to try to inform the traders which accounts should be reviewed, because those are the ones that are potentially mismarked. And it's really a data-driven exercise to try and find out how much risk you want to take on from each individual customer.
Okay, I've got another question here talking about FSB's German plans. Can you see that, Dave?
No, actually, I don't have my
Okay.
questions
It's
open.
just
I can't read and talk at the same time.
no,
Yeah.
it's just a question if you've already applied for a German sports and slots license or plan
So
to do
we're not we don't get the operator's license ourselves. We're a software supplier, and what we do is we work with regulated operators who are going and getting those licenses. So yes, we're very happy to use the tools that we built for the German market and various other markets that we're operating in. I mean, we basically ask our customers to show us that they've got a legitimate right to market into the territory that they're marketing into, and then go through the normal customer due diligence, and we're very happy to support other German operations.
Cool. And just to wrap it up, it's got a question here from, it seems somebody who knows Mark, Savak Limboa. Does the panel think that endemic esports betting platforms are on a level with the best traditional sports betting platforms? Because obviously it's interesting the way the esports betting ecosystem has evolved from a different area than regular sports betting.
No. I mean, I think if you look at esports, look, I'm a very old man, so esports isn't necessarily something that involves me. But if you look at the big Venn diagrams, you've got esports providers, you've got sports betting providers, and you have got some who operate in between. The likes of Pinnacle are doing a very, very good job, and Betway latterly with esports. I mean, ultimately, I think there are different requirements. There's an ability to understand that they need to see what they're betting on in some cases. So streaming is a prerequisite rather than a value add. I think probably we could learn something as an industry from a sports betting point of view from the guys doing stuff in esports, particularly around technology and streaming technology and pushing things out quicker. But from a fixed odds point of view, I think we will continue as an industry in driving that increase in sports betting from what is a very low base at the moment.
And Joe, you've been looking at esports closely?
Yeah, I'm slightly skeptical on esports. Not that it doesn't have an enormous audience of the sort of people who bet, but from an operator perspective, there's still too many interesting results. I mean, hooky results, basically. There's too much fixing.
Too many outliers.
too much fixing going on. And fundamentally, I also think that the people who provide the product, so the people who provide the games are going to start coming after the IP of their ownership. So all these platforms that are basically exploiting somebody else's IP and offering betting on it, I suspect that that's going to be a major structural change in the esports betting area in the next couple of years.
And Dave, a couple of minutes left.
So most of our operators haven't asked for a lot of esports content, and I think it's really got to be operator driven. What customer demographics are you going after? And if you're not going after those demographics, then you're not going to be asking us as a supplier to find and integrate the feeds. What we did find is during the pandemic, once we plugged in some FIFA esports for soccer games, that's where the replacement betting came in. And while there wasn't any other soccer on, that very quickly became a very popular thing to bet on. But it also disappeared once the premium quality content came back on stream. And I think that's fairly indicative for me that that our customers aren't really targeting an esports audience as much as anything else. I think it is a very exciting and large opportunity, but I think it's still got some ways to go before it's going to be really kind of robust enough to to kind of build your business on.
Sure. I mean, the proper esports bettors, sort of say that if you can say such a thing as a traditional esports bettor, they don't really bet on FIFA anyway. So I think, as you say, it's just a regular punters looking for something that looked like football to have a bet on, be it virtuals or on esports. But no, interesting stuff, guys. Thank you very much. We're coming right up against the hour mark now. So Dave, Joe, Mark, thanks very much for the conversation. Thanks to everyone in the audience for asking questions.